the body keeps the score. How your mind is creating physical pain. We wake up each morning not to silence, but to a quiet storm already in motion. Before the eyes fully open, before the body stretches into the day, something is already speaking. A current beneath thought, a pulse beneath emotion. It is subtle, but it is relentless. We feel it in the body before we can name it. The slight tightness in the chest as the phone lights up, the shallow breath when we remember unfinished work, the heaviness behind the eyes after a night of restless thinking. Even in stillness there is movement. Even in calm there is a hum. We tell ourselves that life is what happens out there. The traffic, the deadlines, the expectations, the relationships that pull and push us. We believe that the world presses on us, shapes us, defines how we feel. But if we look closely, really closely, there is something strange happening. Two people walk through the same street. One feels suffocated, overwhelmed by noise and chaos. The other feels alive, energized by the same sounds. Same street, same moment, two entirely different worlds. So where is the world actually happening? It does not begin outside. It begins here, inside this invisible field we carry everywhere, like an atmosphere wrapped around our experience, a field we rarely examine, yet it colors everything we see, hear, and touch. We call it mind. But that word is too small for what it truly is. It is not just thought, it is not just emotion. It is the lens, the filter, the interpreter, the storyteller, and the silent architect of our reality. Everything we experience passes through it. And more than that, it doesn't just receive the world, it creates it. There is an old teaching that says, the mind is the source of all things. It leads, it governs, it shapes. Every action, every reaction, every story we live inside it begins there. At first, this sounds poetic, abstract, maybe even philosophical. But if we slow down enough, we begin to notice something unsettling. Because if the mind is leading everything, then what exactly is leading our mind? We often move through our days as if we are in control, choosing, deciding, acting. But if we watch carefully, we begin to catch small cracks in that assumption. A comment from someone stays in our head for hours, not because it matters, but because something inside keeps replaying it. A mistake we made years ago still has the power to tighten our chest today. A future that hasn't happened, yet can already make our body tense, our breath shorten, our stomach twist. Nothing is physically happening in those moments, and yet everything is happening. Because the mind is not just observing reality, it is generating it. Imagine for a moment that your mind is like a vast ocean, not calm and still, but constantly moving, waves rising, crashing, dissolving, reforming. Some waves are gentle, pleasant thoughts, hopeful ideas, small joys. Others are violent fear, regret, anger, self-doubt. Now here is the part we rarely see. We are not just floating in that ocean. We are also the force that creates the waves. And most of the time, we don't even realize we're doing it. We react automatically. A thought appears, and we follow it. An emotion arises, and we become it. A memory surfaces, and suddenly we are living inside it again. There is no pause, no space, no awareness, just wave after wave after wave. And so we become tired, not from the world, but from being pulled endlessly by something within us that we do not yet understand. You can see it in small, everyday moments. Scrolling through your phone, you feel fine until one image shifts your mood. Suddenly, you are comparing, doubting, lacking, sitting in a quiet room. Nothing is wrong until your mind brings up something that went wrong, something that might go wrong, something you wish had gone differently. And just like that, your body responds. Your shoulders tighten, your jaw clenches, your breath becomes shallow. The body obeys the mind instantly without question. It does not wait to confirm if the danger is real. It trusts the signal, and the mind sends signals constantly. This is where the real exhaustion begins, not from what happens to us, but from what the mind keeps generating after it happens. A single moment becomes an entire story. A single thought becomes an entire identity. A single feeling becomes a permanent state. We say, I am stressed, but what we often mean is a pattern inside my mind is repeating, and I don't know how to stop it. We say my life is overwhelming, but what we often mean is my inner world is moving faster than I can keep up with. And because we don't see this clearly, we look for solutions outside. We try to control the environment. We try to fix other people. We try to eliminate uncertainty. But no matter how much we adjust the outside, something inside keeps recreating the same patterns, like waves that keep returning to the shore, again and again and again. There is a quiet momentary, but real when we begin to notice this. It might happen late at night, when everything slows down, or in a moment of stillness, when we suddenly realize how loud our inner world has been. In that moment, a question appears. Not a loud question, not a dramatic one, just a simple, almost fragile curiosity. If my mind is shaping everything I experience, then what happens if I understand it? That question is the beginning of something profound, because it shifts the direction of attention from outside to inside, from trying to control the world to understanding the source of how the world is experienced. And as that shift begins, we start to notice something else. The mind is not one solid thing. It is a stream. Thoughts come and go. Emotions rise and fall. Sensations appear and disappear. Nothing stays. Everything moves, even the thoughts that feel permanent are not. Even the emotions that feel overwhelming change. Even the identities we cling to shift over time. And yet we hold on to them as if they are fixed. We build our lives around them. We suffer because of them. We defend them, protect them, and sometimes even become trapped inside them. All because we have not yet seen the nature of the mind clearly. We think the waves are the ocean. We think the thoughts are who we are. We think the passing is permanent. And in that misunderstanding, a quiet tension forms. A friction between what is constantly changing and our desire to make it stay. This friction is subtle, but it is everywhere. It is in the need to be recognized, the fear of being rejected, the pressure to succeed, the inability to rest even when nothing is wrong. It is the background noise of modern life, and most of us have learned to live with it without ever questioning it. But something in us knows, because every now and then, we feel the weight of it, not as a dramatic collapse, but as a quiet fatigue, a sense that something is off, that despite everything we chase, fix, improve, and achieve, there is still a layer of unease we cannot seem to escape. That unease is not random. It is a signal pointing us back to the source, back to the mind. Not as an enemy, but as the origin of everything we experience. There is a moment subtle, almost invisible, where this realization deepens. We begin to see that the mind is not just reacting to life. It is actively participating in shaping it. Every interpretation, every judgment, every story we tell ourselves, they are not neutral. They are creative acts. And those acts have consequences, not just in what we feel, but in how we live. Because the mind that constantly expects failure will see obstacles everywhere. The mind that clings to control will feel threatened by uncertainty. The mind that defines itself by past pain will carry that pain into every new moment. Without realizing it, we are not just experiencing life, we are rehearsing it, reinforcing it, recreating it, moment after moment, thought after thought, until it begins to feel like fate. But it is not fate, it is pattern. And patterns can be seen, and what can be seen can begin to change. This is where the story truly begins, not with the world, not with other people, but with this simple, powerful truth. The mind is the source of all things. It leads, it governs, it shapes. And whether we are aware of it or not, it is always creating something. And the question that quietly waits beneath all of this is not whether the mind is powerful. It is this: if the mind is creating the world we live in, what kind of world is it creating for you right now? And more importantly, is it a world you are consciously choosing? The body is often the first place the mind tells the truth. Long before we can explain our suffering with words, the shoulders rise, the jaw locks, the breath shortens, and the stomach quietly tightens as if it has heard a threat the conscious mind is still denying. We begin to see that modern suffering is rarely only emotional. It has weight, posture, rhythm, and sound. It lives in the way we sit at a desk for 10 hours, in the way we check our phone before we have even fully entered the day, in the way we carry one more unfinished demand as though our nervous system were made of steel. A young professional wakes before sunrise and feels the day already closing in. Her chest is tight before she even stands up. She has not failed yet, but the mind has already rehearsed failure. She has not been judged yet, but the inner narrator has already assembled the evidence. By the time she reaches for coffee, her body is not preparing for breakfast. It is preparing for battle. A father at midlife sits in his car after work with both hands on the steering wheel. staring forward without moving. Nothing is happening. That is exactly the problem. His body is still, but his mind is running a court trial in the background. Did I do enough? Am I becoming irrelevant? Did I miss the moment when my life became smaller than my responsibilities? His throat feels thick, his chest feels hollow. His jaw is clenched so long that pain has become familiar. A student in a bright room full of people laughs at the right times and nods at the right moments. But inside she is calculating how much of herself she must hide in order to remain acceptable. Her smile is polite, her stomach is not. The digestive system, as if in protest, becomes a map of all the things she never says. Her body is carrying the cost of being easy to be around. And then there is the person who appears composed, perhaps even successful, but cannot sit still in silence for more than a minute. The moment the noise fades, the inner machinery becomes audible. Worries about money, worries about aging, worries about whether the best years are already behind. So they keep moving, they keep checking, they keep producing, not because they love motion, but because stillness makes the hidden pressure visible. The pattern is everywhere, and it is almost never random. The mind creates a demand, and the body pays for it. The mind imagines an emergency, and the nervous system obeys as if the emergency were real. The mind cannot tolerate uncertainty, so the body lives in vigilance. The mind cannot forgive the past, so the body continues bracing against a danger that has already ended. What does that look like in daily life? A tight band across the forehead by noon. A mouth too dry to speak with ease. A chest that cannot fully expand on the inhale. A neck that feels glued into place. Hands that remain slightly cold. Sleep that is never quite restorative, because even in bed the mind is rehearsing tomorrow. These are not separate problems. They are one conversation, repeated in different tissues, and beneath those symptoms are recognizable human archetypes, each carrying the same wound in a different costume. There is the achiever, whose self-worth has been welded to output. This person often looks disciplined, even admirable, but the hidden cost is severe. Rest becomes suspicious. Pleasure feels undeserved. Every pause triggers guilt. The body of the achiever is often shaped by chronic alertness, raised shoulders, tense temples, a clenched lower back, and a breath that never drops fully into the belly. The message running beneath the skin is simple. If I stop, I will disappear. There is the pleaser whose survival strategy is to remain useful, agreeable, and emotionally manageable. This person may rarely be openly angry, but anger does not vanish, it is rerouted. It lodges in the throat, the jaw, the chest, and sometimes in the stomach as nausea or a constant twisting discomfort. The pleaser's body has learned to swallow what the mouth cannot safely say. Even kindness becomes exhausting when it is performed from fear rather than freedom. There is the avoider, who has become a master of distraction. This person often reaches for screens, snacks, plans, fantasy, or busyness the moment discomfort appears. Their body lives in fragments, never quite settled into the moment, because the moment is where the pain lives. The breath is shallow, the attention scattered, the sleep light. They are not lazy. They are running from internal weather they do not yet know how to weather. There is the controller who believes safety can be manufactured through vigilance. The controller reviews, predicts, organizes, and mentally simulates every possible outcome. But control has a paradoxical effect. The more the mind tries to hold reality still, the more brittle the body becomes. The neck stiffens, the gut tightens, the chest loses softness. There is never enough certainty, so the nervous system never gets the message that it can stand down. And there is the wounded one, who learned early that pain must be managed privately. This person often carries old grief in a way that appears calm from the outside. But unprocessed hurt has its own architecture. It sits behind the eyes as heaviness. It compresses the breath. It can make the voice smaller, as though speaking too fully might open a floodgate. The body remembers what the mind has organized into a story and tucked away. These archetypes look different, but they share one hidden mechanism. The mind keeps producing a sense of threat, and the body keeps becoming the stage on which that threat is rehearsed. This is why so many people feel tired in ways that sleep does not fix. It is not only physical tiredness, it is vigilance fatigue. It is emotional compression. It is the strain of constantly preparing for what might happen, what should have happened, what should be happening, and what might never happen at all. We rarely notice how much effort it takes to maintain the identity we think will protect us. To be the competent one, the strong one, the easygoing one, the one who never needs too much, the one who always knows what to do, the one who does not disappoint. These identities seem practical, even noble, but they require muscular effort, like holding a heavy object aloft for too long. Eventually, the body begins to complain. The shoulders carry the weight first, then the neck, then the jaw, then the breath, then the stomach, then sleep, then mood, then memory, then patience. What begins as a mental habit becomes a bodily climate, and that climate affects everything. A person under chronic pressure does not merely feel stressed, they perceive the world through narrowed attention. Neutral comments feel loaded. Small setbacks feel personal. A delay feels like disrespect. A silence feels like rejection. The body, already on alert, interprets the world according to the mind's tension. This is where psychology and physiology become inseparable. A threatened mind creates a threatened body. A threatened body creates a defensive interpretation of life. And then that interpretation feeds the original fear. The circle closes. The ancient teaching about mind is not abstract at all once we see this. It is anatomical. It is behavioral. It is lived in the posture of the spine and the tempo of the pulse. The body becomes a confession. It reveals how much of our life is spent resisting reality instead of meeting it. And the deepest resistance often hides inside a very modern sentence. I cannot afford to feel this, so we suppress. We continue. We optimize. We numb. We organize the outer life while the inner life keeps sending distress signals in a language the ego does not want to translate. That is why anxiety often feels so difficult to explain. Nothing bad is happening in the obvious sense, and yet the body is acting as though catastrophe is near. The reason is simple and painful. The body does not only respond to present facts, it responds to believed meanings. If the mind says I am falling behind, the body tightens. If the mind says I am not enough, the body collapses inward. If the mind says I must not fail, the body braces for impact. If the mind says I have to hold everything together, the body becomes a clenched fist. And because these sentences repeat for years, the nervous system begins to treat them like law. This is how suffering becomes embodied, not in one dramatic event, but in thousands of tiny repetitions. A micro-betrayal of the breath, a micro-clenching of the jaw, a micro-abandonment of the body's need to soften, a refusal to listen when tension first speaks. Over time, the body stops asking politely and starts speaking louder. Pain, fatigue, numbness, insomnia, digestive unrest, palpitations, a sense of being permanently on edge. None of these should be dismissed as mere inconvenience. They are often the visible edge of an invisible habit. The habit of living as though inner safety must be earned by control. But control is a fragile god. It cannot hold the whole human experience. It can only pretend to. The more honestly we observe, the more we see that our most common crises are not created by the event itself, but by the mind's refusal to remain with reality as it is. A missed opportunity becomes proof of personal deficiency. A conflict becomes proof of abandonment. A mistake becomes proof of unworthiness. A comparison becomes proof of failure. The body absorbs every verdict. No wonder it is tired. No wonder it hurts. No wonder the simplest instructions, breathe, rest, soften, pause, can feel almost impossible to follow when the inner world has trained itself for years to do the opposite. What we call stress is often the bodily expression of a deeper confusion. The belief that we must become someone else in order to be safe. Someone more impressive. Someone less vulnerable. Someone more in control. Someone who never disappoints. Someone who never needs help. Someone who never fully falls apart. But this imagined self is not a refuge. It is a burden, and the body knows it. So the shoulders carry it, the neck carries it, the jaw carries it, the breath carries it, the stomach carries it, until one day, the body is no longer willing to cooperate with the performance. Then the truth appears, not as philosophy but as sensation. We are not simply living in our circumstances. We are living inside our interpretations of them. And those interpretations are written into the muscles, the breath, the organs, the sleep, and the pulse. That is the anatomy of modern suffering. It is not dramatic enough to make headlines, but it is intimate enough to shape an entire life. And if we are brave enough to stay with this truth, we begin to understand that the body is not betraying us. It is telling us, with remarkable precision, where the mind has been living for too long. We have now seen the wound clearly enough to stop pretending it is only in the mind. It is in the body, in the breath, in the jaw, in the sleepless night, in the way the heart tightens before the email is even opened. And once we see that, the question changes not, why am I like this, but what is the mind doing that the body is faithfully carrying? There is a deeper cruelty in human suffering that many never notice. The first pain arrives from life itself. The second pain is created immediately afterward by the mind. A loss happens, a failure happens, a harsh word lands, an uncertainty appears. That is the first arrow. But then the mind begins to replay, judge, resist, fear, and build identity around the event. That is the second arrow. The first may be unavoidable. The second is often self-inflicted. This is where the teaching cuts through illusion like a blade. What we call my suffering is often not one thing, but two layers fused together. The event is one thing. The story we build around the event is another. The event may be painful. The story is what turns pain into bondage. A person receives criticism at work. The first arrow is the sting of being corrected. The second arrow is the spiral. I am not respected. I am failing. People see through me. I am less than I hope to be. The body hears the whole sequence and tightens for every sentence, not just the original comment. By the end, the chest is heavy. The throat is closed, and the nervous system is now defending an identity that was never actually threatened in the first place. A relationship ends. The first arrow is grief. The second arrow is the collapse into self-blame, fantasy, and endless replay. If only I had been better. I must not be lovable. I will always be left. The heart does not only break once. It is broken repeatedly by the mind's refusal to let the moment be what it was. Painful, yes, but not a verdict on one's worth. A business fails, a plan collapses, a health scare appears, a parent ages, a friend changes, life moves. That is the nature of things. But the mind demands permanence from what is by nature temporary. And when reality refuses to obey, the mind interprets the refusal as betrayal. This is the hidden architecture of suffering. The mind mistakes change for personal attack. That mistake is ancient. It lives in every culture, every age, every nervous system that has not been trained to see clearly. We want life to stay arranged around our preferences. We want our image of ourselves to remain intact. We want our loved ones to remain close, our bodies to remain strong, our plans to remain stable, our future to remain predictable. But life does not sign this contract. It never has. And yet the ego keeps acting as if it has. The ego is not simply arrogance. It is the fragile sense of me that must constantly defend its story. It is the structure that says, this is who I am, this is what I deserve, this is what must not be taken from me. The ego is always negotiating with reality. It wants guarantees from a world that offers none. So when reality shifts, the ego interprets it as threat. Then comes clinging. We cling to youth, to status, to certainty, to being seen a certain way, to being needed, to being right, to being in control, to being exceptional, to being safe. But everything clung to becomes a source of tension, because everything in life moves. This is where the teaching of impermanence becomes not a theory but a medicine. Things change, bodies change, moods change, relationships change, reputations change, plans change, feelings change. The breath changes from one moment to the next. The problem is not that change exists. The problem is that the mind insists it should not, and that insistence is the birthplace of the second arrow. A person says, I know people leave, but I still cannot bear it. Another says, I know failure is part of growth, but I still feel shattered when I miss the mark. Another says, I know my body is aging, but I cannot stand what that means about me in each case. The surface issue differs, but the deeper pattern is the same. Reality is moving and the mind is demanding stillness. The mind then punishes the body for not being able to resolve what cannot be resolved by force. This is why so much self-improvement fails. It tries to fix the ego instead of seeing through it. It tries to polish the self-image instead of understanding that the self-image is unstable by design. It tries to replace discomfort with achievement, but achievement only gives a brief anesthetic if the deeper clinging remains untouched. The teaching here is sharp and merciful at the same time. Sharp because it reveals that much of what we call suffering is amplified by our own mental reactions. Merciful because it means we are not powerless before suffering. If the second arrow is being fired by the mind, then the mind can learn not to fire it. That is a revolution, not a cosmetic one, a structural one. Let us look deeper. When the first arrow lands, the body experiences sensation. Heat, pressure, pain, contraction, shaking, emptiness. If we stay close to that raw experience, it is difficult but manageable. But almost immediately, the thinking mind arrives and says, "This should not be happening." That one sentence changes everything. It creates resistance. Resistance creates tension. Tension creates more pain. Then the mind says, "See, this is terrible." The loop is complete. The same thing happens with anxiety. The first arrow may be uncertainty. The second arrow is the obsessive demand to know, to secure, to eliminate every unknown. But life cannot be made fully known, so the mind becomes exhausted fighting a battle it cannot win. The same thing happens with shame. The first arrow is a human mistake. The second arrow is I am a mistake. One is an event. The other is identity. And identity is harder to escape because it feels like truth. This is where the illusion of a solid self becomes dangerous. We begin to think that every feeling is evidence of who we are. Anger means I am an angry person. Fear means I am weak. Desire means I am trapped. Grief means I am broken. But feelings are weather, not essence. Thoughts are passing formations, not commandments. The self that claims ownership over every mental event becomes a prison guard inside its own house. And the more we believe that guard, the more we suffer. The Buddha's insight dismantles this structure by pointing to direct experience. The body hurts, yes. The mind reacts, yes. But neither sensation nor reaction is the full truth of what we are. They are events arising in awareness. When we confuse them with the whole self, we suffer more than necessary. This is the quiet radicalism of the teaching. You are not required to believe every thought simply because it appears in your mind. That sounds simple. It is not easy. Because the mind is persuasive, it uses memory as evidence. It uses fear as prophecy. It uses repetition as truth. It says, "You failed before, so you will fail again," it says. "You were abandoned before, so you will be abandoned again." Says you were unsafe once, so you must remain vigilant forever. This is not wisdom. It is traumatized forecasting. The mind becomes a machine for turning old pain into future suffering, and the body once again bears the cost. But the moment we see this clearly, the spell begins to weaken, not because pain disappears, not because loss becomes easy, not because uncertainty becomes pleasant, but because we stop adding the extra layer of self-punishment. We begin to distinguish between what is happening and what we are doing with what is happening. That distinction is the beginning of freedom. A young woman stands in front of a mirror after a difficult day. The first arrow may be fatigue. The second arrow is a flood of judgment. I look tired. I am falling behind. I am losing my edge. I am becoming invisible. Her face is not the problem. Her relationship to the face is. The body becomes a battlefield because the mind cannot rest with ordinary human imperfection. An older man receives a medical result he doesn't understand. The first arrow is fear. The second arrow is catastrophic narrative. This is the beginning of the end. I should have done more. My body has betrayed me. Now he is suffering not only from the uncertainty of health, but from the mind's demand for total control over mortality itself. A mother hears her child cry and instantly feels inadequate. The first arrow is stress. The second arrow is I am failing at the most important thing. The child's need becomes a mirror for her deepest insecurity. She does not only respond to the cry, she responds to the ego's fear of not being enough. In all of these examples, the same mechanism appears. The mind turns experience into self-story. That is the second arrow in action, and the self-story, once believed, hardens into suffering. This is why wisdom in this tradition is not mere positive thinking. It is not just be calm. It is not suppression. It is not denial. It is clear seeing. We see the first arrow, we feel it honestly, and we stop inventing extra arrows out of fear and identity. This is where practical training becomes essential, because insight without practice remains fragile. We need a way to meet sensation before it becomes story, to feel emotion before it becomes identity, to notice thought before it becomes command. That means learning a new kind of intimacy with experience, not the intimacy of control, the intimacy of presence, the kind that says, yes, this is uncomfortable, yes, this is temporary, yes, this is real, and no, it does not have to define me. When we begin to live this way, something extraordinary happens. The body stops feeling like an enemy territory. The breath deepens. The jaw unclenches more often. The shoulders learn they do not have to carry every outcome. The nervous system receives a new instruction. Not every signal is an emergency. The mind does not become perfect, but it becomes less tyrannical. And that is enough to change a life. The teaching is simple, but it cuts deep. Much of our suffering comes not from the wound alone, but from the mind's repeated return to the wound as if punishment could prevent pain. What would remain if we stopped doing that?